Hey all, in this video I'll be going over the basics of everything that you need to know to get started making your first parts in PTC Creo. This video is kind of targeted more for those first time users or people that have never really used 3D modeling programs before, but it could be a good refresher also if you haven't used the program in a while. If you don't already have Creo installed on your computer, I'll put a link down in the description to somewhere that you can get it for free if you're a student. So let's go on ahead and get started here. When you open up Creo, this will be the screen that you'll see right away. Up in the top left here you can see New Open. That's just kind of standard features you see in any program. News where you can create new parts, assemblies, anything like that. Open, you can open any previous files that you have or downloaded. But the first thing I always like to do when I open up Creo is to select my working directory. This option here lets you pick where your working directory is, what folder you'll be working in, and Creo will save all of the documents, parts, anything you make in this session into that folder. If you don't set this up, I think the default is that it will go to your My Documents folder, but if you want to stay organized, setting a work directory can help with that. So for now, I'll just set my desktop as a working directory. So next thing, go over here, click New. Then you can see here, these are all the different kinds of objects you can make in Creo. You can make sketches, so these are just 2D line drawings. Parts, anything 3D assembly is an assembly of parts that you can make. And then all these other options are kind of for more advanced things, but for just getting started, I really just want to worry about parts and assemblies. And then later on, once you have parts or assemblies, if you're wanting to laser cut or do anything like that, that's when you're going to have to use drawings and formats a little bit more. But for the basics, we'll just start with these two. Go here and just make a part, name it whatever you want. One thing to note, Creo, it won't let you put spaces in the name, so you always got to do underscores or dashes. Click OK. So now we're in the part creation menu. This view here shows your three planes, your X, Y, and Z planes, and this is where the part will start to come to life once we get going. On the left here, this is the model tree. It shows all the features, sketches, anything that gets created in the model over here. Up top here is just kind of your menu bar that you see in a lot of different programs. But we'll stick with the modeling tab for now, since that's what will get used the most. So I'll just kind of walk through this tab here. So here in the datum tab, you can see there's planes, axes, points, coordinate system, sketch. These are all things that you can add in addition to these three planes that are already defined that can help you use sketches to create different kinds of features. So for example, if you wanted to create a point that you wanted to reference in a part at a later time, click on a point and you can define that here. I don't use those too much, but when I do use them, I'm usually making planes at angles that are maybe at like a 45 to these to create features that way. So next thing over here, you can see the Shapes tab. Extrude is what I use the most. You can basically do anything with Extrude. An extrude function is basically taking a 2D sketch and then pulling it to make it 3D. So one thing I always like to keep in mind when I'm 3D modeling is when I'm imagining the 3D part that I'm trying to make, just say a cylinder for example, you always kind of got to break it down into what that object is in 2D. So when you smash that down into a 2D sketch, it's a circle, and then to make it 3D, you pull that circle a specific distance, and then you have your cylinder. So to kind of show an example of that, I'm going to go here, click Extrude, and then whenever you're making a feature, most of them will, this placement thing will pop up here red, so that means you need to select somewhere to sketch. And because a sketch is usually 2D, it'll have you select a plane. It doesn't really matter which one you pick when you're starting your part, but it could make a difference later on. So I'm just going to click the front plane here. So now we're in the sketching mode. Tab, as you can see, changed a little bit up here. You've got all the different things you can draw: lines, rectangles, circles, other more advanced things here. There's an editing tab, and then some constraints and dimensions. I don't use these two tabs too much, but adding in dimensions can be helpful in some cases. So for this quick example, I'm just going to kind of go through the example I just talked about, where I sketched something in 2D and then extruded it to make a 3D object. So for this, I'm just going to make a simple cube with a hole in it. So I'm going to go over here, and a cube, 2D, is a square or rectangle. So I'm going to go here, make a center rectangle. And as you can see, we're kind of looking at it in a 3D view, but I want to get it flat so I can sketch on it like I'm drawing on a sheet of paper. So I'll go here to this bar and click the sketch view. Now this automatically changes the view so that we're normal to the plane that we're sketching on. So for this part, I just want to draw this rectangle or square. You can draw it anywhere, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw it at the origin here, keep everything nice and clean. So just click and drag out the shape there, and then Creo automatically places these dimensions that are required to define this shape. So for rectangle or a square, 2 dimensions define it, just the 2 side lengths. What I had mentioned earlier is this dimension here. Let's say for whatever reason your rectangle is defined by the 2 diagonal lengths. Then you can go here, click dimension, click on this corner, and then middle click somewhere on the other side, and you can see it makes a dimension for this line instead. And then you can change your dimensions that way. I'm just going to keep it simple, Control Z, and just go back to the 2 side lengths. And let's say I want this square to be 50 by 50. So now Creo's default, it kind of started off with bigger dimensions. You saw the 200 there, but once I changed it to 50 by 50, it got a little bit smaller, a little bit harder to see. So I want it to kind of automatically zoom in to fit. So what I can do to do that is I can click on the keyboard Control and D, and that'll bring it back to that 3D sketch view. But now again, it's in the 3D view, but we want to be sketching again. So we'll go back to the sketch view here, and now we're back normal. Everything's blown up a little bit and we can see it better. I said earlier I wanted to have a circle or a hole in this cube, so I'm going to go here, click a circle, and this one I'm going to do a little bit offset from the origin, spice it up a little bit. So I just clicked on that line, drag it out, okay, and now you can see here that we have this circle with its diameter and then this distance from this horizontal line. So let's just make this 15 and then this 10. Okay, so now we've got our 2D sketch. If you can kind of think in your mind what this is going to be when we pull it out to 3D, there's going to be a cube with a cylinder cut out in this top left corner here. So let's say this sketch part is done. Then we can click OK. And now we're back at this screen. Now the sketch that we drew was orange. And again, we see this 216 here, just a little bit too big for what we want. Not the right dimension, so I'm going to go over here. I want it to be a cube, so we want 50 by 50 by 50. Enter. And then this tab up here is the extrude options. So what I just changed here was the dimension that we're extruding, so to 50. This option here lets you flip back and forth, pretty self-explanatory. And then this sidebar here, it's not super useful in this case, but in other cases where you're trying to extrude very specific things or make certain parts a certain way, probably sounds a little bit confusing, but once you get into it a little bit more, you'll kind of start to see that. So this option is saying that from the plane we chose to sketch on, it's coming out one side, or if we flip it, comes out the other side. The second option here, it's a mid-plane extrusion, so you can see here this plane is now in the middle. So what this does, it'll equally distribute this 50 on both sides. So it'll extrude out of both sides half of that amount. And then this third option here is more useful if you have a kind of more complex part, but it will extrude it up to another surface. So a good example of that is in the past I've had to make a lot of brackets where there's a cylinder that'll be attaching on a pipe, and then there's some other piece that is attaching or has to go and extrude to that cylinder. But if you just extrude a flat distance, you'll have just a flat side on this cylinder and it won't line up or look proper. So what you can do is you can make your sketch and extrude down to the surface, and then it will perfectly fit on that cylinder. But for now, we'll just stick with this. Nothing crazy. Click OK. And now we've got our cube with the hole in it. You can also use extrudes to cut. In this case, we created with an extrude, but you can also use them to cut. So let's just show that quickly. Let's say I'm going to cut out of the top here. Click on the top surface, go into the sketch view. And then let's just make something a little crazy here. The possibilities are endless with this. Just use your creativity and engineering to make parts for whatever you need. So just made this wacky sketch here. I can click OK. And now we can either, again, like extrude it up out of that face, which is not something that I'm trying to show right now. I want to show you how to cut. So then you see here, now that we had another object already created, this option popped up where it says remove material. So we can click that. And now you can see here, it's trying to cut up from this surface, but there's nothing to cut there. So then we're going to want to flip that around to cut into the part. And now you can see that it cut into it. So extrudes are pretty powerful. You can get away with making almost any part with it. There's other parts that can be more complicated, that can be easier made with other functions, but if you really want to, you can do basically anything with this. So I'll bring up another option here. Now that we're cutting, we can just use the dimensions like we had before. You can put in a dimension, it'll cut down that specific dimension, but in here another option popped up, another two options. This one will extrude all the way through the part or the direction that you're going, so you see it cut all the way through. You could just as easily cut 50, but if it changes at all, having this can help as well. So we'll be done with that. We'll click OK. So that really kind of gets you everything you need to start making parts, but let's say you made a mistake, one of these dimensions was wrong, you wanted to change something. Now is when you go back over here to your model tree. Let's say we actually wanted our cube to be 100 by 100. So we click on this extrude 1, which made that first cube, and then we can go up here to this button, edit definition, click on that. See, we're back at this screen, but we can't edit the original square dimensions that we drew here. So then we'll go back into the sketch view, right click, hit edit internal sketch. Now we're back in the sketch view here. Change our dimensions to 100 by 100. Click OK. Now we got the original square to be the dimensions that we want, but then we need to change this value to 100. And now we're there. So I'll just warn you, if you're making some more complex parts that have a lot of features, and your references are a little off, then if you go back here and let's say just hit extrude 1 and you try to edit that and some other feature is referencing that specific feature, you can run into some issues where you almost kind of have to remake your part. So I'd just be careful of that. So yeah, that really should get you everything you need to start making just kind of some basic parts, brackets, really anything. I can't even name off examples just because there's so many different options. So yeah, that just about does it. I'll plan on making another advanced version of this video going over some of the more options like I talked about, references, and then I'll maybe get into some other advanced modeling things that can help you once you get used to the program a little bit. So don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and come back for more. Thanks.